Rain lashed against the neon sign of the roadside motel, blurring the word Sunset Palms into an eerie, flickering glow. The storm was relentless, each drop hammering the cracked pavement and pooling in the potholes that lined the parking lot. Wind howled through the palm trees, bending their silhouettes into strange, menacing shapes. The world outside was a blur of water and neon, the night air thick with the scent of ozone and wet asphalt. It was the kind of night that made secrets harder to keep, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides, swallowing the edges of the world. Detective Mia Lane, her trench coat dripping and hair plastered to her forehead, pushed open the battered door to the motel lobby. The smell of damp carpet and stale cigarettes hit her like a wall, mingling with the faint metallic tang of something far more sinister. Her boots squelched on the thin, stained carpet as she stepped inside, shaking off the worst of the rain. The lobby was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners, the only light coming from a flickering lamp behind the front desk. The motel clerk, a young man named Lucas, barely looked up from his computer screen. His face was pale and drawn, eyes darting nervously between Mia and the glowing monitor. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his hands trembling as he tapped at the keyboard, the blue light casting ghostly shadows across his features. The storm outside seemed to seep into the room, making the air heavy and electric.
"Detective Lane?" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper, as if afraid the storm might hear him. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to Mia, pleading for her to understand the gravity of what he'd witnessed.
"You called it in," Mia stated, her voice firm despite the knot in her stomach. She tried to project calm, but the tension in the room was palpable, every word hanging in the air like a challenge. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, thunder rumbling in the distance, as if echoing the dread that had settled over the motel.
"Room 103, Lucas mumbled, pointing a trembling finger down the dimly lit corridor. It's bad." His voice cracked and he swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I've never seen anything like it," he added, his words barely audible over the pounding rain.
Mia's gut churned. She'd seen her share of crime scenes, but something about the way Lucas spoke, the haunted look in his eyes, made her skin crawl. She steadied herself, forcing her breathing to slow, trying to focus on the task ahead. She could feel the weight of the room, the palpable sense of dread that hung in the air. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the old building a reminder that something terrible had happened here. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the soft, anxious breaths of the clerk behind her. A life had been taken here, a story abruptly ended. The echoes of violence lingered, invisible but undeniable, seeping into the walls and floorboards. Mia could almost hear the final moments, the panic, the struggle, the desperate plea for help that had gone unanswered. As she walked towards room 103, the faint echo of a woman's terrified voice played in her mind. Each step felt heavier than the last, the corridor stretching out before her like a tunnel into the unknown. The rain battered the windows and the flickering lights cast long, shifting shadows on the peeling wallpaper. "911, please help me. He's got a gun." The words echoed in Mia's memory, chilling her to the bone. She could picture the woman's trembling hands, the terror in her eyes as she dialed for help, her voice barely more than a whisper in the darkness. "That was her last call," a uniformed officer muttered, his face grim. He stood just outside the crime scene tape, his shoulders hunched against the weight of what he'd witnessed. The badge on his chest seemed dull in the low light, a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded. The line went dead after that. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow all hope. The phone, now hanging limply from its cord, was a stark reminder of the desperation and fear that had filled the room only moments before. Mia took a deep breath, the metallic scent of blood heavy in the air, and pushed open the door. The hinges creaked, echoing down the empty hallway. Inside, the room was a tableau of chaos and violence, the story of a life cut short written in blood and broken glass. As the storm raged outside, Mia steeled herself for what she would find within, knowing that this night would haunt her long after the rain had stopped. The room was a tableau of chaos, every detail screaming of a struggle that had ended in tragedy. Furniture was overturned, a lamp lay shattered on the floor, and the stench of fear clung to the damp air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. The walls, once a dull beige, now bore the marks of violence, scratches, smears, and a single, desperate handprint trailing down toward the floor. Outside, rain tapped against the cracked window, the neon sign of the motel flickering in and out, casting eerie shadows that danced across the scene. The detective stood in the center, surveying the disordered, gloomy room, his face set in grim determination. Every inch of the space seemed to whisper secrets, fragments of a story waiting to be pieced together. A woman lay sprawled on the floor, her lifeless eyes staring into the void as if searching for answers that would never come. Ava Monroe. Her name, whispered by the officer at the door, sent a chill down Mia's spine. The detective's voice was low, almost reverent, as he repeated it, as if the name itself carried a weight too heavy for the room to bear. The officer at the door, his expression grim, watched as the forensic team moved quietly around the body, collecting evidence, documenting every detail. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles in the aftermath of violence, when the world seems to hold its breath. She knew this woman, or rather, she knew her voice. Memories flickered in Mia's mind, fragments of conversations, laughter echoing in sunlit rooms, and a shadow always lurking just out of sight. There was a familiarity in the way Ava's voice had trembled, a resonance that tugged at something deep within Mia. It was as if the past was reaching out, demanding to be acknowledged, refusing to be forgotten. The connection was undeniable, and it sent a ripple of unease through her.
"Please, he's going to kill me!" Ava's frantic plea from the 911 call echoed in Mia's head, the words etched into her memory with chilling clarity. The desperation in Ava's voice was unmistakable, a raw primal fear that cut through the static of the recording. Mia could almost feel the cold sweat on Ava's skin, the trembling in her hands as she dialed for help. The call was brief, punctuated by sobs and the sound of footsteps approaching, growing louder, more menacing. Each second of silence on the tape was a reminder of how quickly hope could be extinguished.
The desperation in her voice was chilling, a stark reminder of the terror Ava must have felt in her final moments. It was the kind of fear that seeps into your bones, that lingers long after the sound has faded. Mia listened to the recording again, searching for anything, a word, a breath, a background noise, that might offer a clue. The silence that followed Ava's last words was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow the room whole. It was a silence Mia recognized, one she had known herself in the darkest chapters of her own life. Mia closed her eyes, trying to block out the gruesome sight and focus on the voice, on the clues it held. Ava's voice was young, filled with a fear that resonated deeply within Mia. She could almost see herself in Ava, trapped, desperate, searching for a way out. The memories threatened to overwhelm her, but Mia forced herself to listen, to remember that every detail mattered. She steadied her breathing, grounding herself in the present, determined not to let the past consume her. The pain in Ava's voice was a mirror, reflecting Mia's own scars, both visible and hidden. It was a fear she knew all too well, a fear that had haunted her own past. Opening her eyes, Mia surveyed the room, her gaze sharp and searching. She took in every detail, the broken glass, the scattered belongings, the faint outline of a shoe print near the door. Each piece of evidence was a thread, and Mia was determined to follow them all, to unravel the story that had ended so violently here. The detective caught her eye, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They were both chasing ghosts, both haunted by whispers from the past. This wasn't just a random act of violence. This was personal. The evidence pointed to something deeper, a connection that ran beneath the surface. But what did Ava stumble into? What secret had she uncovered that was worth killing for? And who was the man who wanted her silenced? As the rain continued to fall outside, Mia knew that the answers lay hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to listen to the whispers from the past. The air in room 103 was thick with the weight of secrets. Every inch of the space seemed to whisper a story, a piece of the puzzle that was Ava's last night. The faded wallpaper, peeling at the edges, seemed to hold memories of whispered conversations and hurried footsteps. The battered nightstand, with its single flickering lamp, cast long shadows that danced across the stained carpet. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally uncover the truth that had been buried within its four walls for far too long. Mia moved methodically, her eyes scanning for anything out of place, anything that could offer a clue. She paused at the edge of the bed, noticing a faint indentation on the mattress, as if someone had sat there, waiting. Her gloved fingers traced the outline of a shoe print on the faded carpet, barely visible in the dim light. The killer had tried to cover his tracks, but he wasn't as thorough as he thought. There were signs, subtle, but there if you knew where to look. A scuff mark on the door frame, a single thread caught on a splintered drawer. Each detail added to the growing sense that something terrible had happened here, something that refused to stay hidden. A cigarette butt smoldered in an overflowing ashtray, its brand unfamiliar. Mia leaned in, noting the lipstick stain on the filter, too dark to be Ava's. She wondered who it belonged to. The ashtray was crowded with old butts, but this one was fresh, still warm to the touch. It was a silent witness, a clue left behind by someone who thought they could slip away unnoticed. Mia carefully bagged it, knowing that even the smallest detail could break the case wide open. A faint, musky scent lingered in the air, a man's cologne, cheap and overpowering. It clung to the curtains and drifted from the pillow, mixing with the stale odor of old smoke and cleaning chemicals. Mia wrinkled her nose, recognizing the brand from another case months ago. The scent was out of place, too strong for someone just passing through. It was as if the person had wanted to leave a mark, a signature, or perhaps they simply didn't care who noticed. Either way, it was another piece of the puzzle, another thread for Mia to follow. "Lucas!" Mia called out, her voice sharp. "Did you see anyone enter or leave room 103 last night? Anyone at all?" Her tone was calm but insistent, the kind that made it clear she expected the truth. Lucas stood in the doorway, shifting from foot to foot, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable, as if the room itself was listening in.
Lucas, his face paler than before, shook his head. Not after she checked in. I swear, detective, I didn't see anything." His voice trembled, barely above a whisper, and he avoided Mia's gaze, staring instead at the worn carpet. He fidgeted with a keychain, the motel's logo worn smooth from years of nervous handling. The words came out in a rush, as if he was desperate to convince not just Mia, but himself, that he was telling the truth.
But Mia didn't miss the flicker of hesitation in his eyes, the way his gaze darted nervously towards the door. She watched him closely, noting the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his jaw clenched as he swallowed hard. There was something he wasn't saying, something he was afraid to admit. The silence in the room grew heavier, pressing in on both of them. Lucas knew more than he was letting on, and Mia was determined to find out exactly what secrets he was hiding, no matter how deep she had to dig.
Ava's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the motel room. She had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. She had trusted the wrong person, a charming stranger who had promised her the world. Now, trapped in this dilapidated room, she realized the terrifying truth. He wasn't who he said he was. He had lured her here just like the others, she realized with a sickening clarity. She had seen the fear in their eyes, the desperation that mirrored her own, but she wouldn't be another victim. Ava grabbed the lamp, its weight surprisingly reassuring in her trembling hand. "Get away from me!" she screamed, her voice raw with terror as he lunged.
The struggle was brief, brutal. Pain exploded in her head as she fell, the lamp clattering to the floor. Through the haze of pain, she saw his face contorted with rage, and then everything went black.